Hello everyone. It's JavaScript FW Days 2023 conference, and the next talk is from Philip Rakovsky. Philip is co-creator and CTO of the biggest open source e-commerce project. Also, he's an active member and official partner of Vue.js community. And a fun fact about Philip, it's in a free time he writes Vue school blog about performance and Vue best practices. So basically, today talk will be about this. As usual, during the talk, please post your questions to the official public GSF W Days channels, and after the talk, we will have a live Q&A session. So it's time for presentation. Please welcome Philip Rakovsky.
Hello, my name is Filip Rakowski. I am co-founder and Chief Developer Experience Officer at Vue Storefront. And I'm also a Technology Council member of MAH Alliance. The MAH Alliance is a non-profit advocacy group that is advocating for open and best-of-breed enterprise technologies. And we have members like Netlify, AWS, Algolia. And the goal of MAH Alliance is to push the e-commerce industry forward. And for those of you who don't know what Vue Storefront is, Vue Storefront is a solution to a quite complex problem of building e-commerce storefronts. It's much harder than it seems, and you obviously feel very powerful after displaying data from the first API endpoint, but from there, production, it's a very long way. And Vue Storefront is a set of open source tools for developers that just make it simpler. It's fully open source, so you can just check it on GitHub. And, I was at this conference in 2019, and I really fell in love with people, with the city. It was a really nice experience, and honestly, it's terrible that we can't all meet together and have fun again, just like it was back then. I have absolutely enormous respect for Ukrainians fighting for their freedom. You are the real heroes for the whole Western world. And the Russian war against Ukraine is, I think, something that just shouldn't happen. And, I hope this pointless conflict made just to fulfill ambition of a madman will end as soon as possible. But despite my enormous respect for you and your country, I know you're here to listen about something else. So, as it is usually with me, I will talk about performance, or to be more precise, measuring performance. Because these days, web performance is one of the most important things everyone wants to optimize on their apps. And it's quite clear to everyone how big the impact of well-optimized websites is on business metrics. By the way, if you need a good source of arguments for your boss, for example, to take care of performance, you can check out this website, WPO Stats. And you may not believe me, but 5 years ago, when we were writing the first lines of code for Vue Storefront, the topic of front-end performance was almost non-existent in the web dev space. At that time, the JavaScript SPA frameworks, they were gaining huge traction, really. AngularJS and React, they were already well-established tools. Even Vue just released the second major version of Vue.js. And only 3 years later, it became one of the most popular SPA frameworks in the world. And the thing is, at that time, almost no one cared how fast the websites built with those technologies are. Not everyone, everyone say that, putting so much JavaScript on the front end was a bad idea. But it wasn't as clear as now at that time because, honestly, it's mostly due to the ecosystem. And as long as we were using PCs and laptops as primary machines to consume the web, no one seemed to be concerned with the growing size of websites. Both CPU and internet bandwidth, they were progressing faster than websites were growing their size. And this all changed when mobile started to become the preferred way of consuming the web. And according to Google research in 2017, and if you compare that with the current chart, it's much worse right now. So in 2017, it took on average 15 seconds to fully load a web page on a mobile phone. 15 seconds. Would you wait that long? I don't think so. So at that time, the awareness about the impact of poor mobile performance on the business started to emerge, thanks to companies like Google, actually. But we're still lacking an easy way to link those two components, so performance and business. And everything changed when Google Lighthouse started gaining popularity. So I remember when it was introduced and became really rapidly adopted in e-commerce space following progressive web apps hype around 2018. Everyone was obsessed about progressive web apps. Everyone were obsessed about web performance. And almost no one knew anything about both. Unfortunately, not much has changed since then. So, what makes Lighthouse so widely adopted is its simplicity. You run a test and get a number between 1 and 100. That tells you how good or how bad the performance of your website is. Everyone, even those without technical background, can understand that. And to be honest, that's the root of the problem. Because the reality is not that simple. The web performance or user experience, it cannot be measured as a single number. In addition, there are a lot of nuances around how a Lighthouse audit works. And to use it as a reliable source of knowledge, you really have to be aware of those nuances. You won't read about those things in the audit summary. They recently added some information, but still they are not complete. But don't worry. We will navigate through all the nuances, and at the end of this talk, you will know exactly where things are coming from and when not to trust them, which is even more important. So let's start with a simple question. What does Google Lighthouse really measure? And how we can use this information? Because I have a feeling that many people don't try to answer it and just blindly assume that the score has to be high to be right, and that's all they need to know. So as we can read on the Lighthouse website, the goal of Google Lighthouse is to measure page quality. And the audit divides the quality into 4 categories: performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO. All of those combined to give you a good perspective of the quality of the website, and by that, try to accurately predict real-world user experience. Try to predict is accurate here, because the audit will not give you any definitive answers about your user's experience. Google has always promoted this performance score as the most important one, and in the heads of the general audience, Lighthouse score equals performance score. So, quality page means page with high performance score. And don't get me wrong here, I think performance is definitely a major factor influencing page quality and user experience. But the fact that we got so obsessed with just one of the 4 metrics gives the false impression that the only thing that matters to the end user is performance. And if we get it right, our users will have a delightful experience. In reality, there are so many factors influencing good user experience that even all 4 Lighthouse metrics can give you a definitive answer if it is good or if it is bad. And I assure you that the best way to start improving experience is just talking to your users and learning how they use your app and what they are struggling with. And if you want to use the data from Lighthouse in your decision-making process, you need to put it in the right context. Because without knowing the context, it's very easy to make bad decisions that logically could seem correct, but they are not. BMI, body mass index, I think is a great analogy to Lighthouse score. So, does 30 BMI mean that you're obese? Well, if you look at the chart, we can say with full confidence, yes, you are. But when we dig into the details of how the results should be interpreted, we learn that this scale doesn't work for a very large amount of people. Older adults, women, muscular individuals. The interpretation for them is different. But this list doesn't end here. The interpretation for children and adolescents is also different. So the only group that comes to mind that actually fits into BMI algo are non-muscular middle-aged males. So the initial results, if you only look at the scale, They could lead you to bad decisions if you don't dig into those specific details. This kind of thinking could lead to real disasters. For example, if you look at this chart, we can quickly jump into the conclusion that we can put an end to horrible things just by banning worldwide cheese consumption. You don't want that to happen, right? So, making business decisions based on a raw number without broader context usually leads to bad decisions. But you can make even worse ones if you don't even know where this number comes from. So let me quickly explain how the Lighthouse score is calculated to make sure we're all on the same page. The Lighthouse score is calculated from a bunch of other metric scores, and each of those metrics has its own weight. Some of them are more important, some of them are less important. And the algorithm changes with each version, and it is super, super important information to acknowledge. And this is nothing usual, honestly, because the more Google explores the impact of individual metrics on the user experience, the more accurate the weights are. But this is why it makes no sense to compare your current Lighthouse score to the one from a year or two ago. Most likely the scoring system has changed during this time, and it could have improved or decreased because of the algorithm change, not because you changed something. And I've seen many people who made that mistake and were convinced that their website was slower than before, even though it wasn't. So always look at specific metrics, those low-level metrics that are measured, not the Lighthouse score, because this is an algorithm that is changing. Let's dig deeper into understanding where this magical performance score comes from. So we already know half of the truth behind this number, which is what metrics contribute to this, but we still don't know about the second most important thing, the environment the test is performed in, and it matters a lot. Most people use Chrome DevTools to run their Lighthouse scores. And this is probably the least reliable way of doing that. There are multiple external factors that influence the score. The download and rendering speed depends on your CPU and network. And the developers will usually run the test on their shiny MacBooks with 5G internet in most cases, have better results than real users. In addition, your browser extensions are also treated as part of the website you're auditing. So we can decrease the impact of these factors by running the test in the incognito mode, which will exclude extensions, and by applying CTU and network throttling, but we'll still see different results on different devices. And honestly, running Lighthouse locally is not reliable if you want to compare the results with anyone else. And it's definitely not reliable if you want to tell if the supposed end-user experience will be good or will be bad. Honestly, everyone in the company can run the test, and I can guarantee you everyone will have the different results because the tests were performed in a different environment. You should always test your website in the same environment and limit the external factors to absolute minimum. Otherwise, it's just not a reliable test. So you can have more consistent results if you set up a Lighthouse CI in an external environment. Lighthouse CI is, Lighthouse running on your CI tests on some external machine. Or you can use some external tools like SpeedCurve. But if you need to quickly inspect a website, I suggest taking a look at PageSpeed Insights. PageSpeed Insights is a website made by Google itself, and you can use it to perform quick Lighthouse tests on basically any website remotely on Google Data Center instead of your local machine. So PSI, PageSpeed Insights, usually uses the data center that is the closest one to your location. Sometimes it could use another one if the closest one is under heavy load. This is why you could sometimes get slightly different results on the same page in tests made one after another, though recently they started caching the results. So if you really want to run multiple tests with different results, then you have to run another one in incognito after quite some time. So even though the PSI score will be more consistent, it's still far from being an accurate measurement of real user experience. PageSpeed Insights will run a mobile Lighthouse test on emulated Motorola from a mid-range. So unless all of your users have it, you're gonna experience the website differently. The good news is PageSpeed Insights will also tell you how your website performs in a real world. So at the very top of every audit, you will see Core Web Vitals that has to be green to positively impact your SEO results, and 3 other important performance metrics that are collected from your users but don't affect SEO. We'll explore that in depth soon. For now, just remember that PSI gives you 2 types of results: the real-world result and the synthetic result, which is a result of running it in the Google Data Center. Another problem with Lighthouse is the fact that it is just an algorithm. It gets input, processes the data, gives output. If we know how it works, we can easily cheat it, and that happens more often than you think. You can easily find a lot of articles like this one, showing how to build a website that is getting a perfect Lighthouse score in a particular category while delivering a horrible experience. It's equally easy to trick performance score. You can detect the Lighthouse user agent and serve a different version of your website for auditing tools. For example, you can quickly remove all script tags from your server-side rendered application, and voila! Performance improved to almost 100, because JavaScript is usually the bottleneck. In fact, there are companies out there doing exactly that, and it's a lot of them, trust me. So if the score is suspiciously high compared to the website complexity and real loading experience, there is a high chance that someone is trying to trick you. After hearing my presentation, of course, you can get the impression that, in my opinion, Lighthouse is useless, and this is definitely not my point here. I think it's a wonderful tool, and the fact that Google is trying to find an easy way to help developers identify potential performance bottlenecks impacting user experience, it is definitely worth supporting. The problem is not the tool itself, but the problem is the way how we use it, or to be more precise, how we misuse it. And I have no doubts that Google Lighthouse has contributed to the faster web more than any other tool. But the name Lighthouse has its purpose. Its goal is to guide on improving the page quality, not give a definitive answers if it's good or bad. I have seen websites with a great user experience and low Lighthouse scores, and vice versa. Good performance is a trade-off. You always have to sacrifice something to make it better. Sometimes it's an analytics script, sometimes it's a feature. It's not always a good business decision to get rid of some of them to have better performance. You have to wait it. To me, Lighthouse shines the most when we want to quickly compare different versions of our websites to see if there was an improvement or maybe decrease. It's definitely worth implementing Lighthouse checks in your CI/CD pipelines with Lighthouse CI. You should also audit websites with similar complexity from your industry to get a sense of realistic score in your case that you should be aiming for. Because an e-commerce website, it is rarely scoring above 60, while a blog often hits 100. So it's important to know what is good score in your case. Lighthouse is not a good tool to measure actual experience. Synthetic data, so the one coming from Lighthouse, it will never tell you anything about that. Just to understand your users, you need to collect data from your users. And you don't have to set up any additional monitoring tools to check that. If you audit your page on PageSpeed Insights, at the very top, you'll see how it is scoring against the 4 most important performance metrics. And that will also affect your SEO results. So the data is collected from the past 30 days on devices using Chrome among real users of your website, so keep that in mind when comparing the score before and after the update. The only requirement for collecting this data really is to make your website crawlable, so it basically comes out of the box. So this real-world data comes from something that is called a Chrome User Experience Report, which collects performance metrics from real user devices using Google Chrome. So by default, when you're using Google Chrome, this data is sent to Chrome User Experience Dashboard. You can turn it off in the settings, but why would you, right? And you can easily get access to the history of your metrics in the Cracks dashboard in Google Data Studio. Now, I think we have a good perception of how Lighthouse works and how it could be tricked and when not to use it. But before I finish, I keep saying about the difference between so-called lab data that is coming from Lighthouse, measured in specific environment, and real-world data of your users. And it's important to not optimize the former. And here is why. Here's an example. So if you do a PageSpeed Insight benchmark on a few websites, you will quickly notice that in many cases, there is no relation between a Lighthouse score and the performance data from real users. For example, here you can see a screenshot from an audit of Adidas website. So even though the Lighthouse score is rather high, 81 for an e-commerce, yeah, it is really high, then the real world performance is terrible. Why? Maybe because they are cheating, maybe because their users have worse devices and they have to optimize for it. You always have to know your users, really. That's the only solution. Not look at the Lighthouse score on its own. It's a good indicator, but nothing else. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this talk. If you would like to learn a little bit about things that I'm working on, I'm writing about them on Viewstorefront Developer newsletter. Also, if you care about performance, if you like to learn more about performance, you could also follow me on Twitter. Thanks so much for inviting me to this event, and have fun. Bye-bye.
Hello again. Hello, Philip.
Hey.
Thank you for great presentation. Yeah, we have couple of questions. So maybe may I ask you to maybe sum up basically when to use Lighthouse? I mean, is it make sense to use it for every possible site, or there are some exclusions maybe?
Yeah, so first of all, it doesn't make sense to use it for every site. Like if you have, for example, an application that requires authentication, it is simply not possible to run a Lighthouse on this. Even at synthetic tests, you might be able to do this, like in your own environment, just by removing this, but you won't get that much information from the real world users just based on Lighthouse. So that would be one of the type of the application that cannot be measured just as it is. At the same time, you ask just to sum up when it is worth using Lighthouse. So I would say it is definitely worth using Lighthouse to get a general sense if it is fast, if it is not, because that's the fastest way to do this really, or to see if there was an improvement or decrease in performance between one release to another. So for that, you could use Lighthouse CI. But if you want to make any significant decisions based on this score, just don't, or at least be aware where it is coming from, and always have the real world data in front of you, because this is actually telling you the truth. The Lighthouse score could really trick you, and I showed at the end of the presentation that sometimes you could have wonderful Lighthouse score and absolutely terrible results, and I'm telling you this happens really often. So it's a good indicator, and that's it.
Yeah, but by the way, I'm wondering why someone would like to, or kind of why someone decide to trick the Lighthouse score. So what's the point? I don't think that users usually check in the Lighthouse of the application. So what could be the reason?
The business does. So I will tell you why we are here. So Google started promoting Lighthouse very heavily around the 2017 to 2018. It was great because it was so simple. So, and they started connecting the performance and revenue in the heads of people, especially in the e-commerce space. So right now, every business owner, when they want to, a new e-commerce store, and I'm telling this from my experience, they are asking about the certain Lighthouse score. And they feel that 90 or 100 is the must, even if they will, from one end they will ask for 100 performance, on another angle they will ask for dozen of features and analytic tools, and it's simply not possible to do this. So a lot of agencies decide to trick their customers. A lot of products really decide to trick their customers. Just they have that checked, which is terrible. And it shouldn't be done. It's simply straight
this
lying.
is terrible.
But at the same time, the reason why it is happening is simply because Lighthouse was just, over promoted as the ultimate source of truth. And right now, even though the agencies and the companies, feel that, 100 shouldn't be the main goal of every page because it's just a trade-off, they are doing this for the marketing purposes. And again, I think it is a terrible pattern. If you see someone doing this, it is absolutely undermining the trust to the vendor, to the agency. But if you're looking for the causes, this is the cause.
Yeah, this is definitely terrible. The next question. So basically, does it make sense to, I don't know, to improve Lighthouse to the 100 score, or it's okay to I don't know, stay at 80, or what is your suggestion? So how we should use Lighthouse scores?
Okay, so my suggestion is, first of all, collect the data. So collect the data first, of course, about performance, but then the business metrics, for example, the bounce rate. And if you see, as long as you see that improving performance, for example, correlates well with your revenue, with your conversion rate, with your bounce rate, so you will see that, the performance chart is growing and also the business metric is growing, keep doing that. And when you will see that it doesn't make sense, just stop doing that. And at the same time, have some benchmarks. Like look at the competitors. Look, if everyone in your space, all your competitors are having score of like 40, 80 is absolutely amazing score for you, right? So always know the context. Always look, at the real world impact, because the Lighthouse number on its own, like it means nothing really. It means nothing. It's just an indicator, but then you have to do something with that.
Okay, so basically it's sort of guidance. So we need to run experiments to check whether it makes sense to improve it for our application or not. Yeah, makes sense. And
it is called Lighthouse for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. At the end of your talk, you mentioned about Web Vitals. Is it kind of the same? So it's more like a guidance, or we can rely, I don't know, create an alert, for example, if Web Vitals return some, I don't know, increase, shows an increase, and the team should react on it. So basically,
yeah. So Web Vitals, they are mostly measured in the field. I mean, not all Web Vitals can be measured in the lab environment. So if you look at, for example, the PageSpeed Insights audits, what you will see at the top is this real-world data on the Web Vitals. And actually, these are the things that are impacting your SEO. So this is something that you should definitely optimize, because SEO, it has a very direct link to the business metrics, right? Like discoverability of your page is important. You won't be penalized by not having good Web Vitals, but you will get an SEO boost for each of them that is green for the 75 percentile of your users. So talking in a normal language, whenever the bar on the results page on the PageSpeed Insights is green, you are getting an SEO boost.
No, makes sense. Now I have a question about Web Vitals. Basically, do the network speed affect the Web Vitals, or it's purely about the actual execution?
It affects a lot. Even if you're doing your own test, like for example, if you are using a Chrome, then your network, your CPU, and even your extensions are affecting that. If you are running it incognito, a little bit less, but it's still not a reliable result. And for your users, it really affects that. And this is why also you should always measure it for the real users, because the Lighthouse audit is running on a mid-range Motorola. So as long as all your users don't have mid-range Motorola, it is not very reliable. Like if you have 16, for example, or 60 score, it means that everyone who has the same Motorola and the same internet will also have 60. So it's not very useful information. Let's agree to that, right?
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it's still like a guidance. So you are set up in some base, and then you kind of think about whether you need to improve it or not, or leave it as is. Regarding to the Lighthouse, there is an accessibility score. So can we rely on this score on this part of Lighthouse, or does it make sense to use other tools maybe?
Not at all. I mean, of course, like it will let you know about the things that it identified and you should fix them. But at the same time, there's a great article. I don't remember the title, but if you Google the title of my talk, you will find an article. And in this article, I am linking another article where someone got 100 on accessibility tests for making the least accessible websites ever. So again, this is just a guidance. And that was really the point of my talk. Like, don't blindly believe those numbers. This is just a tool, and it is a tool that is honestly rather easy to trick. Also, if you're not aware about how it works. So always double check, especially when you want to make some serious business decisions about, for example, investing into web performance optimization. First, look if it makes sense, like improve it slightly, for example, see how it affects your bounce rate, see how it affects your revenue. Usually it affects it positively, but there is usually a tipping point from which it just doesn't make sense to optimize further. Of course, the bigger your business is, the more it matters. Like Amazon did a study where they found out that 1% of revenue is increased every time they increase the speed of their website by 100 milliseconds. So for Amazon, it's probably millions, and all the money in the world is worth optimizing. But if you have a smaller company, it might not be worth it.
Makes sense. Yeah, regarding to these optimizations, I do remember there are some researches in the web that basically the time to load of registration page or authentication page is also it's crucial basically for the number of users that will proceed using your website.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a question from a Discord. Philip, what tips can you give for optimizing JavaScript, and what nuances do you pay attention to when writing JavaScript in the context of optimization?
Oh my God, how much time do we have?
I don't know, 10 minutes, so it's like
Okay.
another
So
talk.
I can do another talk in that time. Yeah, so first of all, like JavaScript is generally the biggest bottleneck of modern applications. So if you look at basically all the applications, single page applications that are failing Web Vitals, you will see that the metrics that are affected the most are the metrics that are coming from JavaScript. So metrics related to interactivity. So the best way to optimize JavaScript is really not running JavaScript. And I know it sounds like quite obvious, but you think about this, like you have components on every application, right? Those components, they are rendered, if you are using server-side rendering, they are rendered twice, first on the server, then another on the client. So there is something called island architecture. In React, this is server components. In Vue.js, I think it was called lazy hydration, but in general, the goal is to render the components as static HTML on the server, send it to the client, and never run the JavaScript if they are not dynamic. And guess what? Like 80% of your components probably doesn't need that JavaScript, doesn't need to be dynamic. So there are tools like Qwik, there are tools like Astro that are static by default, and you have to explicitly say that the components should be dynamic. And honestly, that would be my go-to approach for all the applications. So have static components by default and make them dynamic only if you must, because that should be the correct mental model. Like dynamic by default is de facto the cause of why we're having those issues. In addition, there is something that is causing a lot of problems with the performance. So even if you will optimize it perfectly, even if it will score 90, etc., before you go live, then there is this marketing team adding dozens of scripts, which are absolutely ruining it. I've seen websites that were scoring 90 something, then the marketing came in with their analytics tools and it was scoring like 30. It's a common situation. So the solution to that problem is not running the analytics scripts on the main thread. So along with all the rest of the JavaScript that is being executed to paint your page, you don't want that to be affected. You want that to run as soon as possible. So what you could do is you could spawn a web worker, which is like a second thread on the browser, and run the analytics there. And it could sound super tricky, but the truth is there are tools for that, like Partytown is one of them. In Next, you have Next script that is also allowing you to run things in the worker. In Next, you will also have something like that quite soon. They announced it recently. So, in today's era where, the impact of JavaScript on the performance is known, and the fact that it is a bottleneck, it is known, already established solution to solving that. And really all of them boil down to don't execute JavaScript, or execute it exactly when it's needed, not earlier, or execute it on the worker. That's it. Like these 3 rules.
Sounds like a great plan. Thank you for describing this. I'm wondering also. So basically, this is more about the execution time and loading time. I would say the Lighthouse is all about it, like a Web Vitals. Could you suggest any tooling how to measure performance during the runtime? So basically, okay, we did all this optimization, loaded fast, but now what should we do next? How to measure performance when it's live?
Okay, so first of all, like you should measure performance by Lighthouse and by other tools even when it's live and collect this so-called field data, especially Core Web Vitals. Secondly, when we are talking about, because there is loading performance and Lighthouse, runtime performance, as you said, right? So all of everything that I was mentioning is indeed loading performance, and this is most crucial. But it's equally important to have a decent runtime performance, and you can quickly measure that really in your Chrome DevTools. Then you look at the CPU at the FPS count or at CPU utilization, and you're seeing like if the CPU is burning, if the FPS count is low, then it means that you need to optimize. And you will see that on the website. You will see that it is sluggish. You will see that there are some things that are just not as smooth as you would expect them to be, right? But this is always secondary, and there are rarely bottlenecks when it comes to the runtime performance. Maybe in a specific types of applications like dashboards, this sort of things, they're quite common. But in general, if you optimize the loading performance, you probably won't have issues with the runtime performance anyway. It's not, it's not a general truth about life, but in general, in most cases, it works this way.
Yeah, my question is more about the interaction. So maybe some sites like, I don't know, for example, is online editors like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. So definitely there could be some issues. So wondering is there any standard way of how we can measure this kind of issues or performance during the kind of runtime? But yeah, this is definitely it's another topic.
Yeah, I think only by collecting the data and measuring the incidents, like there are tools out there like WebEye, for example, that are allowing you to exactly measure like how your users are interacting with your website, record everything, see when they are bouncing. So this way you can identify like those bottlenecks in the flow. You could also have some performance checks in your tests. For example, you can run the test, end-to-end test that is performing some certain action. And measure the timestamps. Also in Lighthouse itself, you can record the whole path. So it's not only about loading performance, but you could tell it, okay, when it's loaded, go there, click on this, then go there. Pretty much like at the end-to-end test. They recently added this. So there are many ways of doing that, but at the same time, like focus on the loading performance first, because if you want to optimize this, there might be no user to actually delight on the later steps.
Yeah, definitely. One more question from Discord. Philip, can you recommend a good tool for collecting and analyzing RAM metrics? I believe it's about memory consumption. So yeah, sort of.
I mean, web page test is quite good. That's something that I'm usually recommending if you want to get those metrics. A very basic one is like a Chrome user experience dashboard, and this is available for every Chrome website. You don't have to install anything. Like Chrome is collecting that. So if you Google Chrome user experience dashboard, you will see exactly this real world data about Core Vitals, etc., distributed across different devices, different months, etc. So this is already useful on its own. But if you want like a really good monitoring and really good, I would say, maybe not outcomes, but suggestions, because this is what web page test is quite good at. Just use it and try it out.
Okay, cool. And probably the last question. Do we have any alternative for Lighthouse? So you mentioned it was really promoted by Chrome. I mean, do we have any other tooling or approaches on someone else working on something similar or maybe better than Lighthouse?
So there is one that I think is absolutely amazing, and it is honestly much better than Lighthouse when it comes to the optimization of website from the perspective of the best practices checklist, because this is what Lighthouse is best at. It's called Yellow Lab. So Google Yellow Lab, they have a performance tool, the performance measuring tool, and it's absolutely amazing. And honestly, I would use that rather than Lighthouse, because there you have a very long list of different best practices, and you immediately see how you're scoring versus them, what you could improve, etc. At the same time, Lighthouse could be like complementary tool for that, because this is also what business will be looking at anyway. So you have to take this into account. Like, you might hate Lighthouse, but at the same time, you can fight with the whole world. Especially, trying to explain to business people why it is not the most reliable way of measuring performance, while not giving them any kind of alternative that they could read. So we have to satisfy Lighthouse, but at the same time, the fact that we'll satisfy Lighthouse doesn't mean that it will drive any business results. And we are not optimizing just for the sake of optimizing. We are optimizing because we expect that it will bring some results coming from the improved user experience, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, cool. So probably next time we would ask you to have another talk about comparing Lighthouse, Yellow Lab, or what is the best.
No, I would love to.
So yeah, that would be great. So anyway, thank you. We let's switch to Discord live chat. And yeah, thank you for your presentation, and thank you everyone who listened us. So
thanks so much for having me.
bye.
Bye.